Hello. Today we're diving into a story where passion and temptation intertwine with betrayal and self-discovery. Unconscious emotions and secret meetings begin to unravel the familiar world, forcing an inevitable choice. It's a story about how one night can change everything. But before you get comfortable, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. It's really interesting to see who has joined us. Now, get comfortable, we're starting. The ocean breeze had a sweet, humid weight to it as Olivia stepped out of the car. The luxury resort stretched before her. White stone paths framed with lush greenery, terracotta roofs shimmering under the afternoon sun, and the distant sound of laughter from the pool. Her husband, Daniel, was already talking to the concierge, eager to check in. Olivia took a slow breath. She was 32, elegant in a subtle way, with dark hair pinned up and soft lines etched near her eyes from too many tired mornings. This vacation was supposed to be a reset, a break from the cold routine of home, from Daniel's distracted affection, from her own quiet frustration. Their suite overlooked the ocean. The bed was wide, the sheets crisp and cold. Daniel collapsed onto them immediately, groaning about the flight. Olivia stood at the balcony, eyes tracing the curve of the coast. Later that evening, they dressed up for dinner at the open-air restaurant near the main pool. That was when they met them. Sean and Amber, a vibrant couple in their late 20s who sat beside them at a shared fire table. Amber was bubbly and uninhibited, with golden hair and a sun-kissed glow. Sean was lean and boyishly handsome, confident in the effortless way that younger men often were. Conversation flowed easily. Olivia laughed more than she expected to. Wine helped. Amber asked bold questions. Where they were from, how long they had been married, whether they had kids. Daniel, loosened by drinks, spoke more than usual. Then Jake arrived. Olivia noticed him before she realized she was staring. He was one of the resort's entertainment staff. Tall, tanned, with tattooed arms and a smile that verged on wicked. He greeted the table like a familiar, clapping Sean on the shoulder and making Amber giggle with some private joke. His eyes brushed Olivia. Just once. But it was enough. Later, Daniel passed out on a lounger after too many rum cocktails. Olivia wandered alone, heels in hand, past the flickering lights of the pool and down a quieter path. She stopped at the edge of the water, toes brushing the surface. You look like someone trying to remember how to breathe. The voice was low, familiar. Jake. She turned slowly. He stood there with that same half-smile, holding a bottle of beer and no shoes. I could say the same about you, she replied, not sure where the sudden boldness came from. Jake chuckled and sat beside her. They talked. Not about much. Music, work, how the ocean at night sounded lonelier than it did during the day. Then he asked, "You happy?" It wasn't a flirtation. It was a challenge. Olivia didn't answer. Her pulse was loud in her ears. She stood abruptly, brushing sand from her legs. I should go. Jake didn't stop her. He only watched. She walked back barefoot, but it wasn't the sand that made her steps unsteady. Morning came slowly. Olivia woke before Daniel. The soft whir of the ceiling fan, the only sound in the room. Sunlight filtered through white curtains, casting pale stripes across the bed. She sat up, legs crossed beneath her, and looked at him. Her husband, mouth slightly open, one arm flung across the empty side of the bed where she hadn't slept much. The scent of ocean air and distant coffee drifted in. She wrapped a sarong around her body and stepped onto the balcony. Below, the resort began to stir. Workers raking sand, guests ordering breakfast, and the faint sound of pool water lapping in lazy rhythm. Olivia had always believed in loyalty, in routine, in commitment. But lately, those beliefs felt like skin that didn't quite fit anymore. Last night, that brief, electric moment with Jake had left a mark on her, though nothing physical had happened. She spent the late morning alone at the spa, her phone left behind in the suite. The massage room smelled of lavender and salt, and the hands of the masseur, Christopher, were strong but controlled. She felt the tension in her shoulders dissolve under his touch. When his fingers grazed the line of her hips beneath the towel, she held her breath longer than necessary. She wasn't imagining it. That lingering pressure, the pause before he moved on. But it was all unspoken. When the session ended, she dressed in silence, thanked him with a glance, and walked out with legs that felt too soft. At lunch, Olivia met Amber near the pool. Daniel had made other plans. Something about tennis with Sean and some other guests. That suited Olivia just fine. She found Amber reclining on a sunbed in a cherry-red bikini, sipping something with mint and crushed ice. "You look wrecked," Amber said with a knowing grin. "Spa?" Olivia nodded, sliding into the lounger beside her. "You were right. Vacation is like shedding skin." Amber smiled and lowered her sunglasses. "The question is, what kind of skin are you growing back?" They spent the afternoon on a catamaran tour, just the two of them. The boat rocked gently as they sailed past cliffs and coves. They drank champagne, posed for photos, dipped their legs in the water. Amber had a way of making the world feel unserious. Like rules were only suggestions, and pleasure was something to be pursued without shame. "You ever cheated?" Olivia asked without thinking. Amber tilted her head. "Define it." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "That's not an answer." Amber sipped her drink and looked out at the sea. "Let's just say, I think some things happen for a reason, especially on vacations. You're not the same person when you're away from your life. You're lighter, looser, closer to who you really are." The words stuck with Olivia as they returned to the resort. Daniel wasn't in the room when she got back. A note told her he'd gone for dinner with Sean and a few others. He didn't invite her. That evening, Olivia sat alone at the bar. She wore a dress she hadn't packed for Daniel. It was cut low in the back, dark green, with thin straps that clung to her shoulders. Her hair was down. She felt a little exposed, and she liked it. Jake found her, like a magnet finds steel. "You clean up dangerously well," he said, leaning against the bar, his voice quieter than the music playing overhead. Olivia turned her head slowly. He wore a white shirt, untucked, sleeves rolled. His skin looked darker under the warm lights, his eyes glinting like secrets. "I was wondering if I'd see you again," she said. "I was hoping you would." They didn't talk for long. Just enough for her to laugh once, to look at his mouth more than she should, to feel the heat of him even with a foot of space between them. Then he said something unexpected. "There's a party later. For staff and some of the regulars. Off the resort. Little villa just down the beach. Invitation only." Olivia hesitated. Are you inviting me? Jake grinned. I'm just saying. It's not the kind of place for husbands. She didn't answer. She let the silence between them settle like smoke. Back in the suite, Daniel was already asleep again, shirtless and lightly sunburned, sprawled across the bed with one arm covering his eyes. Olivia stood at the edge of the room for a long time. She thought about the massage, the pressure of fingers, the way Amber had looked at her on the boat. Jake's voice. Rough velvet, promising nothing and everything. Later, she sat on the balcony with a glass of wine, staring into the darkness. When her phone buzzed, it was a message from an unknown number. Beach path. Midnight. Come alone. She didn't need to ask who it was, and she didn't need to decide right away. Because somewhere deep inside, the decision had already been made. Olivia stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the strap of her black dress. The fabric clung to her curves in ways she hadn't allowed herself to consider in a long time. It was barely past midnight, and the air outside was thick with humidity, the kind that left her skin sticky and her thoughts scattered. She had to leave before Daniel woke. Her husband was still asleep in bed, his rhythmic breathing a stark contrast to the storm building inside her chest. She glanced back at the room, the soft glow of the lamp casting shadows on the walls. She could almost hear him in the back of her mind, the echo of his careless words from earlier that day. He hadn't once noticed her dress, hadn't once acknowledged the way she tried to hold his attention in the last few days. The indifference felt like a weight on her chest. It was easy to stay, to turn away from what was happening. But tonight, something inside her called out for more, for release, for the desire that had been building inside her, a desire she couldn't ignore anymore. She grabbed her phone, her fingers brushing over the message again. Beach path. Midnight. Come alone. The words felt like a dare, a test. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but she couldn't back away now. The night air hit her like a wall as she stepped outside. She walked briskly down the stone path, her heels clicking against the cold tiles. The sky was deep with stars, the kind of sky she used to dream about. Her pulse quickened as she neared the beach, the sand soft underfoot. The resort was distant behind her, its lights flickering like tiny stars in the night. Here, it was just the ocean and the darkness, an expanse that felt as endless as her own thoughts. As she approached the path leading to the secluded villa, she spotted him. Jake stood there, silhouetted by the faint moonlight, a cigarette dangling from his lips. His stance was relaxed but commanding, a look in his eyes that Olivia recognized. The look of someone who was already aware of the power they held. He didn't say anything when she arrived, just tossed the cigarette into the sand and stepped toward her. His gaze swept over her, and Olivia could feel the weight of it, as if he were undressing her with just his eyes. You came, he said softly, his voice thick with something more than simple surprise. I don't know why I did, Olivia replied, her words barely escaping her lips. She felt exposed, but she couldn't look away. Jake smiled, a slow knowing curve of his lips. You know why. She didn't respond, not at first. Instead, she reached for the hem of her dress, lifting it just slightly as the cool breeze kissed her bare legs. His eyes followed the movement, and Olivia felt a surge of confidence. She had never been this bold, this unrestrained. But tonight, everything felt different. Jake stepped closer, his presence nearly overwhelming. His hand reached out to gently touch her arm, his fingers brushing lightly against her skin. Olivia shivered at the contact, and for a moment, she thought about turning away, about running back to the safety of her room and her life with Daniel. But then Jake's hand slid down to her wrist, his grip firm but not controlling. "No turning back now," he said. And Olivia felt her resolve slipping away. The words weren't a warning. They were an invitation. Without a word, he led her toward the villa, his hand still holding hers. The villa was a small, intimate place, its design rustic yet luxurious, the windows wide and open to the moonlit night. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of ocean air and incense. The soft hum of music played in the background, setting a sensual mood. Olivia could feel the pulse of the night, the way it seemed to vibrate in the very air around them. Jake didn't waste time. As soon as they entered, he turned to face her, his hands reaching out to slide her dress all off her shoulders. Olivia stood frozen for a moment, her breath shallow, her body alive with anticipation. But when the dress pulled at her feet, she didn't back away. She felt something deep inside her unraveling, something raw and hungry. Jake's hands skimmed her skin, the touch light at first, but quickly becoming more insistent, more deliberate. He leaned in, his lips brushing the curve of her neck, sending a jolt through her body. Olivia gasped, her head tilting back instinctively to give him more access. She didn't know why she wanted this so much, why her body was betraying her mind, but it didn't matter. She had stopped thinking. His lips moved to her ear, his breath hot against her skin. "You're beautiful," he murmured, "so much more than you let yourself believe." The compliment made her heart flutter, but it also made her feel exposed, vulnerable. It was like he could see through her, through everything she had hidden from herself. Her hands found the buttons of his shirt, undoing them slowly. The action almost mechanical, as she felt his chest under her fingertips. His muscles were warm and solid, a stark contrast to the delicate skin she had once promised herself she would never let anyone else touch. Jake pulled her into him, his hands sliding around her waist to the small of her back. He kissed her again, this time deeper, more urgent. Her body responded before her mind did, pressing against him as if it had a life of its own. She had never felt so alive, so powerful in her own skin. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper, as he pulled away slightly to look at her. His gaze was intense, searching, as if he were waiting for her to stop him. Olivia didn't hesitate. She didn't want to stop. She shook her head, her lips parting as she reached for him again. "I'm sure." The moment she spoke those words, the last of her resistance melted away. Everything that had been simmering beneath the surface for so long, everything she had ignored and denied, came rushing forward. She was no longer the woman who had quietly waited for her husband's attention. She was something else now, something wild, something free. And Jake? Jake was the spark that set it all alight. The moonlight seemed to wrap around them, casting shadows on the walls of the villa, as Olivia and Jake moved together in a rhythm that felt both foreign and familiar. Her skin tingled under his touch, each caress igniting something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. She had stepped over a line she didn't even know existed until now. Jake's hands were everywhere, warm and confident, making her feel like she was the only person in the world. His lips traced a path down her throat, his breath hot against her skin, and Olivia closed her eyes, losing herself in the sensation. The tension in her body that had been building for days, weeks even, finally found release. She didn't think of Daniel. She didn't think of the vows she had made, the promises she had kept. The only thing that mattered now was this: the wild, undeniable connection she felt with Jake. As his lips found hers again, her body responded with an urgency that surprised her. She kissed him back fiercely, hungry for more. Her hands moved to the waistband of his jeans, pulling at them until they were discarded on the floor. It was as though the barriers that had kept her in check were dissolving, one touch at a time. She wasn't thinking about consequences anymore. There was only the here and now. Jake lifted her effortlessly, his strength surprising her, and carried her toward the bed. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer as they fell onto the soft white sheets. He hovered above her, his eyes searching hers, looking for some sign, some hesitation, but there was none. Only desire. "Olivia," he whispered, his voice low and rough. "You don't have to do this if you're not ready." She met his gaze, her heart pounding in her chest. She was ready. She had been ready for a long time. "I'm ready," she breathed out, her voice thick with anticipation. Without another word, Jake lowered himself onto her, his lips finding her neck again, tracing the sensitive skin there. Olivia arched beneath him, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Every part of her body felt alive, like she was rediscovering a side of herself that she had forgotten. She hadn't felt this wanted in years. His lips trailed down her chest, stopping at the edge of her bra. He paused, his hands gently unhooking it, and Olivia shivered at the intimacy of the gesture. She let her body relax into the bed, giving herself over completely to the sensation, to him. There was no going back now. Jake's hands moved lower, his fingers skimming over her skin, exploring her with slow, deliberate touches. She felt the fire inside her build, each touch sending jolts of electricity through her body. She had been starved for this, for the feeling of being touched, of being desired, in a way that didn't feel like duty or obligation. Her fingers dug into his shoulders as he finally lowered himself to kiss her again, deeper this time with a hunger that matched her own. She lost herself in the kiss, her mind fogging over as the world outside the room seemed to disappear. There was only Jake, only this moment. She moved against him, pressing her body closer, needing more. She was consumed by the heat of him, the way he seemed to anticipate her every move, every breath. She had never felt more alive than she did in that moment, and it scared her. Jake's lips trailed down her body once more, his touch leaving a burning path in its wake. Olivia gasped as he paused, looking up at her with dark, intent eyes. She could see the desire in him, the same desperate need that mirrored her own. He didn't speak, but his gaze told her everything she needed to know. She nodded, her pulse racing. Yes. With that single word, he moved again, his hands and lips caressing her body with a slow, deliberate pace. Each movement seemed to stretch the tension between them, drawing it out until she couldn't stand it anymore. She needed him. She needed something to break the silence, the stillness that had followed her for so long. When they finally came together, the world exploded in a rush of sensation. Olivia cried out, her body trembling as she felt the overwhelming surge of pleasure wash over her. It was intense, almost dizzying, and she couldn't help but give into it, to the moment, to the overwhelming wave of sensation. She was lost in him, in the rawness of it all, until there was nothing but the sound of their breathing, the sound of their bodies moving together in perfect synchrony. She held on to him, her nails digging into his back, her body arching up to meet his as they moved faster, harder. It was as though they had no control, as though everything in the world had led them to this moment, this connection. When they finally collapsed together, breathless and spent, Olivia couldn't help but wonder how she had arrived here. Her body felt like it had been stripped bare, every wall she had built around herself reduced to nothing. Jake lay beside her, his chest rising and falling with each breath. He didn't say anything at first, just pulled her close, his arm wrapped around her waist. Olivia let herself be held, her head resting against his chest, her mind still swirling from the intensity of what had just happened. For a long moment, there was only the sound of their breathing and the soft hum of the ocean outside. She wasn't sure what she expected from this. She didn't know if she wanted an explanation or if she even deserved one. "Are you okay?" Jake finally asked, his voice soft and gentle, as though sensing the storm of emotions inside her. Olivia nodded, though her mind felt anything but settled. She wasn't sure what was going on inside her, or what this meant for her and Daniel. But she knew one thing for certain. She would never be the same again. "I'm not sure," she whispered, the words escaping her before she could stop them. Jake didn't answer right away, but he didn't need to. He simply kissed the top of her head and pulled her closer, as if trying to reassure her that everything, for now, was all right. But Olivia knew that it wasn't. Nothing would ever be the same again. Olivia awoke to an unfamiliar stillness. The air in the villa was cool, the sheets tangled around her legs like a cocoon, and the faint sound of waves crashing against the shore reached her ears. For a moment she wasn't sure where she was, or who she was. The remnants of the night before were still etched into her skin, each memory a sharp, undeniable reminder of what she had done. She rolled onto her back, her chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. Jake was still asleep beside her, his arm draped over her waist, his chest rising and falling in the quiet rhythm of sleep. His body was warm, his presence both comforting and unsettling. Olivia could feel the weight of his touch, the pulse of his breath against her skin, and for the first time, she allowed herself to feel the gravity of the situation. What had she done? She had crossed a line she had never intended to cross. She had betrayed Daniel, her husband, in a way that was far more than just physical. She had betrayed herself, her own sense of control, her understanding of who she was. She had given in to the wild, passionate pull that had ignited between her and Jake. And now, in the cold light of morning, she felt the sharp sting of regret. But there was something else, something deeper. A part of her, buried beneath the shame and confusion, didn't regret it. It was as if a part of her had been awakened by the rawness of the night. A part that had been dormant for far too long. A part that had longed for freedom, for something more than the comfortable, predictable life she had built with Daniel. Olivia sat up slowly, the sheets falling away from her body. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't be this person, the one who had let herself fall so completely, so easily, into someone else's arms. She couldn't face Daniel like this, not after what had happened. She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Jake, and wrapped herself in a robe. Her mind was spinning, racing to make sense of everything. She needed air. She needed space. She needed to think. As she stepped outside, the warm morning greeted her. But the warmth felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. The ocean stretched out before her, a vast expanse of blue that seemed to mock her confusion. She walked along the shore, her bare feet sinking into the soft sand, the salty breeze tangling her hair. The world was quiet, the only sound the rhythmic crashing of the waves. It should have been peaceful, but all Olivia could hear in her mind was the echo of her own heartbeat, pounding with a mix of fear and desire. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out with trembling hands. It was a message from Daniel. "Where are you? I've been looking everywhere for you." Her stomach twisted. She could feel the weight of the words, the question hanging over her like a cloud of guilt. She hadn't told him where she was going last night, and she had barely spoken to him this morning. She couldn't even remember if they had said anything to each other before he fell asleep. He hadn't noticed anything was wrong. He never noticed. Olivia stared at the screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to explain herself, how to explain what had happened, or why it had happened. She didn't know if there was any way to make this right. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she put the phone back in her pocket and walked further down the beach, her mind still spinning. She had always believed that what she and Daniel shared was real, that their love was enough to weather anything. But now, in the quiet aftermath of what she had done, she wasn't so sure. When she returned to the villa, she found Jake sitting on the edge of the bed, his back to her as he pulled on his clothes. He didn't look up when she entered, but she could feel his presence in the room like a weight. There was something about him that felt both comforting and dangerous, something she couldn't ignore. "Are you leaving?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake turned to face her, his eyes unreadable. He didn't answer right away, but instead, he stood and walked over to her, his hands reaching out to rest on her shoulders. His touch was light but firm, as though grounding her in the moment. "I think we both know that last night was complicated," he said softly. His voice was low, almost gentle, but there was an edge to it, a tension that mirrored the conflict swirling inside her. Olivia nodded, unable to find the words to respond. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken truths. "I don't regret it," Jake continued, his gaze never leaving hers. "But I think you're not ready for what comes after." The words stung, even though they were spoken with care. She wasn't ready. She wasn't ready for the fallout, for the consequences of what had happened. She wasn't ready for the guilt, the fear, the questions. She wasn't ready to face Daniel, to see the disappointment in his eyes when he found out. But wasn't it too late? Hadn't she already crossed that line? There was no going back now, not completely. "I don't know what I want," Olivia whispered, her voice shaking. "I thought I did. But now everything's just a mess." Jake stepped back, his hands falling to his sides. He looked at her with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "You need to figure that out. I can't do it for you." He walked past her and toward the door, pausing just before he left. "I'll be at the beach later if you want to talk, but no promises." With that, he was gone. Olivia stood there for a moment, her body numb, her heart heavy. She had done something irreversible. But now, the question was, what would she do with it? The phone buzzed again in her pocket and she pulled it out, her heart in her throat as she saw the new message. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to ignore you. I miss you. Can we talk when you're back?" It was from Daniel. She stared at the screen for a long time, unsure of what to say. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her, each choice leading her down a path she couldn't unwalk. She wasn't sure she could go back to the way things were, and she wasn't sure she wanted to. But the only thing she knew for certain was that everything was about to change. The villa felt too quiet, too empty when Jake left. The air hung heavy, charged with the aftermath of what had transpired between them. Olivia stood there for a long time, staring at the door he had closed behind him, as if waiting for something to change, for some part of her to shift back into the woman she had been before. But she knew, deep down, that it was too late. She had crossed a line, and now everything, her marriage, her identity, her sense of self, hung in the balance. The phone buzzed again in her pocket. Daniel's name flashed on the screen, and her heart twisted in her chest. The guilt was suffocating, and yet there was something else too. A curiosity, a desire to see what would happen if she opened the door, if she allowed herself to face the reality of her choices. She stood there, staring at the phone, the seconds ticking by like an eternity. Should she answer? Should she tell him the truth? Or should she lie, continue to protect the fragile construct of their marriage, even if it no longer felt real to her? With trembling hands, she answered. "Hello?" Her voice sounded small, distant, like it belonged to someone else. "Olivia." Daniel's voice came through the line, warm, familiar, but also tinged with concern. "Where are you? I've been trying to reach you all morning." She could hear the strain in his voice, the worry that she hadn't returned to the villa yet. It was so familiar, so comforting, that it almost made her want to retreat into the safety of her old life. She wanted to tell him everything was fine, that she was just out for a walk or had lost track of time. But the words felt like a lie on her tongue. I'm at the beach," she said finally, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Just needed some air." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and Olivia held her breath, waiting for him to say something, to accuse her, to ask questions. But instead, Daniel's voice softened. "I'm sorry, Olivia. I should have been more present. I've been distracted. I've missed you." The sincerity in his words made her heart ache. He didn't know. He had no idea what had happened, what she had done. And yet, he was apologizing, as if the distance between them was somehow his fault. "I've missed you too," she murmured, her words betraying her as much as they tried to hold on to the illusion of everything being okay. But even as she said it, Olivia knew it wasn't true in the way it used to be. There was a crack in their relationship, one she couldn't ignore anymore. And as much as she wanted to pretend otherwise, it had been there long before Jake had ever come into the picture. "I'll be back soon," she said quickly, desperate to end the conversation, to avoid the questions she wasn't ready to answer. "I just need a little more time." "Okay," Daniel replied, his voice still full of concern. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here." The words felt hollow, as if they were wrapping around her like a shroud, suffocating her. She didn't know what she needed anymore, didn't know how to fix the mess she had made. But she couldn't let herself think about it too much. Not right now. She hung up, her fingers lingering on the screen for a moment before putting the phone down. The silence in the villa was deafening, and Olivia felt it in her bones. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. She couldn't go back to a life that no longer fit her. Her heart was torn, a violent tug between the man she had promised herself to and the freedom she had tasted with Jake. The guilt was overwhelming, but it was mixed with something else. A yearning, a need for something more, something deeper than what she had been settling for. And yet, she couldn't forget the weight of Daniel's voice, the quiet desperation in his words. He loved her. He had always loved her. But love, Olivia realized, was not enough to bridge the gap that had grown between them over time. It was a painful truth, one that she wasn't sure she was ready to confront. She walked to the window and looked out at the ocean. The sight of the waves crashing against the shore, the endless horizon before her, felt symbolic. She was standing at the edge of something, a precipice. And once she stepped forward, there would be no going back. She took a deep breath and turned away from the window, her eyes falling on the phone again. There were no more messages from Jake, no more invitations, no more words. The silence between them felt final, and part of her felt relief in that. But the other part of her, the part that had felt alive with him, the part that had tasted the freedom of being wanted without obligation, couldn't help but wonder if that was something she could never forget. She couldn't lie to herself anymore. What had happened between her and Jake wasn't just a momentary lapse. It was a revelation, a realization that she had been missing something for a long time. Something she hadn't even known she needed. Something she was afraid she would never get back once she returned to the life she had before. Her mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to make a choice. After a long moment of silence, Olivia reached for her phone once more and typed a message to Daniel. "I need to talk. When I get back, we need to have a serious conversation." She stared at the message for a moment, unsure if she was ready for what it would bring. She had no idea what the future held, or if there was any chance of repairing what had been broken. But one thing was clear. She couldn't keep living in the shadows of what had happened. She couldn't pretend anymore. With one last glance at the ocean, Olivia grabbed her things and left the villa. The walk back felt endless, her thoughts spinning in circles. She wasn't sure what she would find when she returned to Daniel, but she knew that she couldn't go back to the way things were. She was changed, and she had to face it. Whatever came next, she had to find the courage to step forward into it.